What if rejecting $1 million inheritance didn't set you free, but made you a target? Gabriel Pierce thought walking away from his father's fortune would give him peace. Instead, it uncovered a secret brother, a criminal empire, and a war he never asked to fight. The mahogany piano had been quiet for years. It sat in the corner of the dusty Manhattan apartment, a relic of the man who once played Mozart in silk pajamas while drinking Macallan and mumbling about the American elite being soft. Gabriel Pierce hadn't touched it since his father died. The envelope rested atop it now, white and thick, sealed with the gold crest of Pierce and Weller, one of the oldest private law firms in New York. His name was handwritten across the front in slanted, deliberate ink. Gabriel M. Pierce. The middle initial felt like an insult. Malcolm, his father's name. Gabriel hadn't spoken it aloud since the funeral. He stood staring at the envelope as if it might hiss at him. "You okay?" Maria's voice came from the hallway. She was barefoot, carrying 2 mugs of black coffee. Her hair was a messy halo and her eyes scanned him carefully, always too carefully these days, ever since the reading of the will was announced. Gabriel took one of the mugs but didn't answer. Instead, he opened the envelope with a slow, surgical tear. Inside, a formal letter, a notarized estate summary, and a handwritten note, short in his father's bold, arrogant script. "To my son, Gabriel, you always said you wanted to make it on your own. Now you can prove it. You'll find no handouts in this will, only opportunities you create for yourself. MP." Gabriel laughed. It was dry and bitter like the espresso burning his tongue. "He left me nothing." Maria blinked. "What?" "Nothing. Not the house, not the accounts, not even the boat. The bastard left it all to the museum, the foundation, and that goddamn cat rescue organization." She tried to smile. "Well, maybe the cats needed it more." He shook his head. "He left me nothing on purpose." There was silence between them. Maria sat down on the faded green couch, pulling her knees to her chest. "He used to say you didn't have grit," she said quietly. "He said I was soft," Gabriel snapped. "Because I liked books more than brokerage reports, because I didn't care about Harvard or hedge funds. He thought starving was more noble than being different." She reached for his hand, but he didn't move. Something in him had already started turning. Gabriel hadn't wanted the money. He told himself that 1,000 times. But hearing it, feeling it, being excluded triggered something raw. He wasn't poor, not technically. His mother's side had left him enough to keep a modest life going. But that wasn't the point. The point was, his father had been a king, and he'd left his son outside the castle walls. 2 days later, Gabriel sent a formal declaration to Pierce and Weller, renouncing any claim to residual inheritance, disclaiming any future assets, and requesting the release of any trust obligations. He wanted nothing from his father. 3 weeks after that, he moved out of the apartment. "Wait, you're leaving New York?" Maria's voice cracked slightly. He looked around the place one last time. The piano, the skyline through the cracked glass, the shadow of a father who still seemed to haunt the corners. "I need space," he said simply. "Somewhere quiet, somewhere where he never walked." She didn't ask if she could come. By August, Gabriel was standing outside a battered farmhouse in western Massachusetts. It was cheap, drafty, and reeked of mildew, but it was his, bought with savings, not inheritance. No marble countertops, no elevator, no ghosts. The locals called him the city guy, but mostly left him alone. He planted tomatoes, learned how to fix plumbing from YouTube, and read for hours beside the creaking wood stove. For a while, it almost felt like peace. Until the letter came. It arrived in early October, no return address. Inside, a single page. "You think walking away is courage? I taught you better. If you want answers, meet me at the address below. One night, no second chances." There was no signature, just an address, Brooklyn. His old neighborhood. And a date, October 14th, 5 days from now. Gabriel's hands trembled, because the handwriting, it looked exactly like his father's. But Malcolm Pierce had been dead for 8 months. The train groaned into Penn Station with a sigh like it resented the journey as much as Gabriel did. He hadn't been back in the city since the move. He'd promised himself never again. But the letter had sat on his nightstand every night for 5 days, a splinter in his mind. He stared at the address again. 213 Vinegar Hill Lane, scribbled in that impossible handwriting. Gabriel hadn't even known Vinegar Hill existed until now, a forgotten corner tucked between Dumbo's glossy cafes and the Navy Yard's rusting bones. He took a cab most of the way, then walked the last 2 blocks. The neighborhood felt like a time capsule. Chain-link fences, chipped row houses, corner bodegas that smelled like fried onions and damp newspaper. The house at 213 was a narrow, gray brick thing, wedged between 2 larger buildings like an afterthought. Curtains were drawn, no lights. A slanted porch light flickered overhead, casting uneven shadows on the door. Gabriel checked the street. No one, just a stray cat slinking into a gutter. He hesitated, then knocked once. No answer. Twice. Still nothing. He reached for the knob unlocked. Inside, the air smelled like old books and pipe smoke. The living room was sparse. A dusty couch, shelves lined with old biographies, a typewriter on a crooked desk. A lamp flickered on in the corner. Gabriel. He froze. The voice came from the shadows, raspy, deliberate, unmistakable. You're Gabriel's breath caught. You're dead. The man stepped into the light. Not his father, but almost. Same sharp jaw, same eyes pale and calculating, but thinner, older, broken somehow like a mirror with a single long crack down the center. I'm not Malcolm, the man said. I'm his brother. Gabriel stared. Uncle Theo. He barely remembered the name. His father had once mentioned a brother, estranged, unstable, a drunk with delusions of grandeur, Malcolm had said. Theo offered a weak smile. I figured he never told you the truth. Gabriel sat, more from confusion than choice. The room seemed to tilt. I got your letter, he said. Why write in his hand? Because you wouldn't have come otherwise. Gabriel's eyes narrowed. Why now? Theo leaned forward. Because the inheritance wasn't about money. It never was. He pulled a small, leather journal from the bookshelf and slid it across the table. Gabriel opened it. Inside, his father's handwriting, pages and pages of private notes, entries dated from 2 years ago up to just a week before his death. They weren't business notes, Theo said. They were confessions, regrets, warnings. Gabriel scanned a few entries. Gabriel doesn't understand what I've kept from him. Maybe that's mercy. The Weller Foundation has secrets tied to Southwick. I tried to pull out. They wouldn't let me. If anything happens, Theo knows where the safe is. Gabriel looked up sharply. What is Southwick? A shell company, Theo replied. International real estate and offshore assets. Your father used it to hide money, but there was something deeper, a network, something illegal. He wanted out, but they had leverage. You're saying he was murdered? Theo didn't answer. Instead, he handed Gabriel a small brass key. That unlocks a safe in an apartment on 88th Street, the last place your father lived before the divorce. If you want to know who he really was, go there. Gabriel pocketed the key. I thought I wanted distance, he said. I thought walking away meant freedom. Theo looked at him solemnly. Sometimes walking away is the first step toward a fight you didn't choose. Later that night, Gabriel checked into a cheap hotel in Midtown. He couldn't sleep. He reread the journal. The entries grew darker with each page. Fears of betrayal, mentions of names he didn't recognize, cryptic references to coded documents. He began to wonder, what if rejecting the inheritance didn't free him? What if it made him vulnerable? And worse, what if someone else knew he had the journal now? Just before dawn, someone slipped a note under his door. In the same handwriting as before. The safe is not the end. They're already watching. Be careful who you trust. Gabriel turned to the window, his heart racing. In the alley below, a figure in a long coat stepped into a black car and drove away. The building on 88th Street looked out of place, like someone had dropped a pre-war European manor in the middle of Manhattan. Stone lions flanked the wrought iron entrance, chipped and weathered, their faces worn blank by decades of rain and disregard. Gabriel stood outside for a long time before ringing the bell. No name on the intercom, no buzz. Then, as if expecting him, the door clicked open. The elevator creaked its way to the 4th floor. When the door slid open, a woman was standing in the hallway, tall, silver-haired, wrapped in a navy shawl. Her face held the calm detachment of someone used to waiting. You're Gabriel Pierce, she said. He nodded slowly. Who are you? I was your father's keeper, she said simply. His housekeeper, his nurse, his confidant, depends on the day. She opened the door behind her. Come in. The safe is in the study. Gabriel followed her into the apartment, larger than expected, with ceilings that arched and echoed, rooms lined with dark bookshelves and oil portraits of stern-faced ancestors. Everything smelled like cedar and disuse. In the study, she pointed behind a canvas of a stormy seascape. Gabriel removed it carefully. Embedded in the wall was a small iron door, no larger than a toaster oven. He inserted the brass key. Clicking. Inside, a stack of old passports, a velvet pouch of uncut stones, a sealed manila envelope and one worn photograph. He picked it up. His father, much younger, standing next to a woman Gabriel didn't recognize. She was holding a baby, not Gabriel, someone else. His pulse kicked. He turned to the envelope. It was thick, marked confidential. Inside were bank records, transcripts of wire transfers, and a single printed page labeled Southwick Transactions, Internal Memo. Lines of small text listed countries: Cyprus, Belize, the Caymans. Money moved through shell corporations like shadows in a tunnel. It was laundering on a massive scale. And every page had his father's signature. "You're not shocked," the woman said quietly. "I guess I always knew," Gabriel replied. "He wasn't just cold, he was calculated." She stepped closer. "There's something else, something he didn't put in the safe." She opened a small drawer in the study's desk and handed Gabriel a folded letter. "I wasn't supposed to give you this unless you found the rest," she said. Gabriel unfolded it. "If you're reading this, it means you look past the money. Good. Southwick is just the surface. The real danger is inside the foundation. They own judges, senators, journalists. And they're watching you now. I didn't leave you the inheritance to punish you. I left it to protect you. They can't trace what you never claimed. But now that you've come looking, you'll need help. Start with Theo. But never, ever trust Amanda." Amanda. Gabriel's blood went cold. That was his mother's name. He returned to the farmhouse 2 days later, but the feeling of isolation was gone. Every window seemed like a vulnerability. Every sound outside made him tense. He changed the locks, shredded every paper that mentioned his name, and started memorizing names from the memo. Most meant nothing. One stood out. Robert Talden. He was listed as External Facilitator, Risk Neutralization. Gabriel searched the name. Former FBI, now head of a private security firm in D.C., Pierce Family Security, incorporated 3 years before Gabriel's birth. Listed owner, Amanda Pierce. His mother had always seemed passive, detached, emotionally armored. Now he wondered if she had been protecting him or managing him. That night his phone rang. No ID, he answered anyway. "You weren't supposed to dig," a male voice said. Gabriel's spine stiffened. "Who is this?" "You're not safe, Mr. Pierce. That envelope you found, it doesn't belong to you. Walk away and this ends quietly." He swallowed. "And if I do?" There was a pause. "Then you'll meet the real heir, the one who was promised everything." The line went dead. Gabriel stood in the dark farmhouse, the floorboards groaning beneath his feet. The baby in the photo. The unknown child. There was someone else. And he wasn't the only Pierce left in this story. Rain came hard that night, slamming against the farmhouse roof like fists. Gabriel didn't sleep. He couldn't. The phone call echoed in his head. "You'll meet the real heir." He spread the photograph on the kitchen table, turning it under the lamplight. His father smiling, the mystery woman, the baby with that same sharp chin, that unmistakable Pierce stare. Gabriel stared at it until dawn. Then he called Theo. "You didn't tell me everything," he said without a greeting. "Who's the child in the photo?" Theo didn't hesitate. "His name is Julian." Gabriel's mouth went dry. "Is he alive?" "Yes," Theo said, "and he has every reason to hate you." Julian Pierce had been born in 1991, just 6 months after Gabriel, the product of an affair Malcolm had with a political aide during a months-long business trip in Geneva. When Amanda found out, she threatened to ruin Malcolm's reputation, his clients, his empire. The only compromise. Amanda would stay married for appearances. But Julian would be erased. No name, no support, no contact. Malcolm agreed, then paid off the mother and vanished the boy like a line in a ledger. Theo, estranged from the family, had tracked the child years later, but by then it was too late. Julian had grown up poor, angry, and fiercely intelligent. By 25, he'd already changed his name and entered finance under a pseudonym. He was nowhere on social media, no birth certificate under Pierce. just shadows and silence. And now, Gabriel asked. Theo hesitated. Now, I believe he's trying to take back what he thinks he's owed. Gabriel closed his eyes. The journals, the warnings, the voice on the phone. Walk away. Julian wasn't just angry. He was already inside the foundation. Gabriel returned to New York under a different name. A favor from Theo got him access to a private workspace at an abandoned co-op in the Lower East Side, tucked between a dry cleaner and a locksmith who never spoke. He pinned photos, documents, and maps to the walls like some noir detective spiraling into obsession. He built a file on Julian. Every pseudonym, every offshore company, every alias connected to Southwick, and one name kept surfacing. Elias Ward, a mid-level executive in a real estate firm tied to Foundation subsidiaries. Elias had the same birthday as Julian, same build, same age, same ambition. Gabriel tracked down an old intern from the firm, someone who remembered Elias. Charming, the intern said, but cold, like he could smile at your funeral and mean it. Gabriel followed the trail to a building in Tribeca. Top floor. Private elevator. No security. Inside, an office too sleek for its own good, empty of photos, full of chrome and silence. He waited by the front desk until the secretary returned from lunch. Then he asked, "Is Mr. Ward in?" The woman blinked. "Are you on the list?" "No," he replied, "but he'll want to see me." 10 minutes later, the door to the executive suite opened. Gabriel's breath caught. Julian was taller than him by an inch, dressed in gray, hair slicked back, and when he spoke it was like hearing his father again. "You took your time," Julian said. Gabriel stared. "You knew I'd come." Julian walked to the bar and poured himself a whiskey. "The moment Theo contacted you, he's always been theatrical." "You threatened me," Gabriel said. Julian smiled. "I warned you there's a difference." Gabriel stepped forward. "So what this is about revenge, inheritance, you want the house, the name, the ghosts." "I don't want the name," Julian said. "I want the control. The foundation is just the surface. My father built an empire, then tried to bury it, but I know how it works. I know who to move, who to break." He leaned forward. "You had everything, Gabe, and you threw it away. Now I'm here to claim it." Gabriel's voice dropped. "He left you nothing." "He left me the pieces," Julian said, tapping his temple, "and I've already started rearranging the board." Gabriel walked out of the office with a storm behind his eyes. He understood now. This wasn't a squabble over money. It was war, a quiet one, fought in shadows between blood. He didn't know yet how he'd fight back. But he would. Because Julian was wrong about one thing. Gabriel hadn't thrown everything away. He had freed himself from it. And now that made him the only one truly unpredictable. Gabriel sat alone on a park bench in Battery Park, watching the ferries crawl through the fog. The conversation with Julian had been colder than expected, clinical, like Julian wasn't driven by rage, but by precision. He wasn't the rebellious, bitter son seeking justice. He was a tactician, and Gabriel was a piece on his board. The journal burned in his backpack. Every time Gabriel thought about turning it in, he hesitated. The foundation was too deep. Judges, senators, law enforcement, names his father had hinted at but never said aloud. And worse, Julian had inherited something far more dangerous than money. He had inherited his father's mind. Later that night, Gabriel went to Theo's apartment. It was ransacked. Drawers pulled, bookshelves gutted, furniture flipped, but no blood. Gabriel stepped carefully through the wreckage, heart pounding. He found a Polaroid on the kitchen table, new, crisp. Theo alive, tied to a chair, bruised, gagged. A sticky note was taped to the top. "We warned you, stop digging, no second chances." Gabriel sat down on the torn couch, eyes hollow. They were escalating. Not just watching. Not just threatening. They were hunting. 3 days passed in a blur of paranoia. Gabriel checked into a different hotel every night. He stopped using his phone, paid only in cash. He made a single call from a borrowed burner. Maria answered on the second ring. He hadn't spoken to her in weeks. "Gabriel," she said, cautious. "Yeah," he whispered. A pause. Then softly, "You sound scared." "I need to meet just once," he said. "Somewhere neutral, somewhere open." She didn't ask why. She never did. They met at a train station cafe in New Rochelle. Gabriel wore a baseball cap, sunglasses. Maria ordered him tea before he sat down. "You look thinner," she said. He almost laughed. "I haven't eaten anything without peeling off a tamper-proof seal first." "What's going on?" she asked. He slid the journal across the table. She read a few lines, her hands trembling. "Is this real?" "Yes." "And the man who called me 2 nights ago?" she asked. Gabriel froze. "What?" She leaned in. "He said his name was Elias Ward, said he was concerned about your well-being, asked if I knew where you were, said you'd been unstable since your father died." Gabriel swallowed hard. "You didn't tell him anything, did you?" "No," she whispered, "but Gabe, he sounded so calm, like he was your brother." Gabriel nodded slowly. "He is." That night, Gabriel made his decision. He wasn't going to run. He wasn't going to hide behind journal pages and burner phones. If Julian had inherited the machinery of Malcolm Pierce's empire, then Gabriel would have to dismantle it the way Malcolm had built it, quietly. One connection at a time. One crack in the marble until the whole facade crumbled. He started by sending 3 encrypted packages. One to a journalist in Vermont. One to a whistleblower legal team in D.C. One to a judge his father had once trusted, now long retired. Each package included partial files from the Southwick transfers, just enough to stir suspicion, but not so much that Gabriel couldn't deny involvement if caught. It was bait, and if the Foundation took it, they'd reveal themselves. The first response came 5 days later. A knock on his motel door. Gabriel peered through the peephole. "Maria." "Alone." He opened the door and pulled her inside. "Are you crazy?" he whispered. She held up her phone, a voice memo. She hit play. "You think you're playing chess," Julian's voice said, "but you're just trying to survive the first move. Let me give you one final offer, brother. Walk away, or I'll start cutting away everything you love, piece by piece." The recording ended. Gabriel stared at her. "How did you get this?" "He left it on my windshield," she said, "at work." She looked at him. "Gabe, he's not just coming for you." "I know," he said. "But you're not afraid." He exhaled slowly. "I'm not allowed to be anymore." Gabriel turned on the burner phone and made one final call. Not to friend, not to a lawyer. To a man named Luther Quinn, a former enforcer from his father's old network, blacklisted, disavowed. "You're the one who burned the yacht off Marseille, right?" Gabriel said. There was a pause on the line. "You Pierce's boy?" "Yeah," Gabriel said, "but I'm not my father." "Good," Luther said. "I hated your father." "Then maybe we can help each other," Gabriel said. "I'm not trying to take over the Foundation. I'm trying to kill it." Luther chuckled. "Now you're speaking my language." Gabriel sat at the edge of a burned-out train yard in Yonkers, the air thick with diesel and secrets. Across from him, Luther Quinn smoked a cigar that smelled like tar and judgment. The man looked like he'd crawled out of a forgotten war, scarred, stone-faced, with hands that twitched like they missed holding weapons. "I need leverage," Gabriel said. Luther exhaled slowly. "You don't need leverage, kid. You need an exit plan." Gabriel shook his head. "I'm not leaving, not yet. I have names, transactions, a full journal, but I need the next layer, the inner circle, the handlers." Luther squinted. "You want to cut the arteries." "I want to make sure no one else can put this machine back together." Luther nodded slowly. "Then we go to Rhinebeck." Gabriel frowned. "What's in Rhinebeck?" "An estate your father used as a private retreat," Luther said. "Southwick's paper trail hits a dead end there. No cameras, no neighbors, no cell towers, just secrets buried deep." Gabriel leaned back. "How do we get in?" "We don't get in," Luther said with a crooked smile. "We let them bring us in." The plan was ugly, dangerous, and very Pierce. Gabriel leaked another file, only this time under Julian's signature. A forged email. A series of manipulated transfers that made it look like Julian was siphoning Foundation funds into his own shell corporations. Just enough truth to sting. Just enough falsehood to trigger panic. Luther made a call to an old courier with ties to the Foundation. Within 48 hours, Gabriel received a simple message on his burner. "Rhinebeck, come alone, Friday, midnight." He drove north in silence. No music. No calls. Just the hum of tires and the dull ache of inevitability. The estate sat behind 7-foot stone walls and an iron gate that groaned open on approach. Pines lined the road like silent judges. As Gabriel pulled up to the mansion, floodlights bathed the gravel lot in sterile light. Two men in suits met him at the steps. They said nothing, just motioned. Inside, the house was colder than outside. Hardwood floors, Persian rugs, animal heads mounted like trophies of a war Gabriel hadn't known his father fought. Julian was waiting in a room that looked like a small theater, velvet chairs, a projection screen, a long mahogany table. "Nice to see the prodigal son again," Julian said. Gabriel didn't sit. Julian poured 2 glasses of scotch. "You forged a trail back to me," Julian said. "Clever." "You threatened someone I care about," Gabriel replied. "I warned her," Julian corrected. "You're the one who keeps making this personal." Gabriel stepped closer. "It was always personal. You don't build your life on revenge and call it strategy." Julian leaned back. "Then what's your life built on, Gabriel? Walking away from money, from power? That's not morality. That's cowardice dressed up as virtue." Gabriel stared at him. "You don't know what virtue is." Julian's smile dropped. For a moment the room was still. Then a voice from the shadows. "That's enough." A woman stepped into the light. Tall, ageless, dressed in black. Amanda Pierce. Gabriel felt his throat close. "Mother." Her expression didn't change. "This wasn't supposed to happen. You weren't supposed to get involved." Gabriel stepped back. "You knew about all of this." "I managed the risk," she said. "You were protected as long as you stayed silent." "You let them operate," he said. "You let Dad destroy people." She looked tired. "I preserved the family. That was my job, not love, not approval, preservation." Julian turned to her. "You see, I told you, he doesn't have what it takes." Amanda's eyes flicked to Gabriel. "You have one chance," she said. "Leave the country, change your name. The foundation will dissolve quietly. No more letters, no more threats, but if you stay, you will be erased." Gabriel didn't blink. "I already left once," he said, "and it let all of this survive. I'm not running again." Outside, Luther waited in the woods. At exactly 12:44 a.m., the estate's lights blinked twice. That was the signal. He inserted a small device into the building's underground power box. Then lit a match. 3 minutes later, the east wing went dark. Fire alarms shouting chaos. Gabriel ran. Not away, but toward the vault beneath the estate. The place Julian had never thought to guard. Inside were old reels, audio tapes, backup files. The final puzzle piece, proof that Southwick wasn't just laundering money. It was laundering lives, changing identities, funding foreign campaigns, arming rebel groups. He stuffed what he could into a duffel and vanished into the woods. By sunrise, the mansion had burned halfway down. No injuries, but enough questions to stir press interest. The fire had a name now. The Pierce Rebellion. And Gabriel wasn't hiding anymore. The headlines came first. Pierce family estate burns in mysterious blaze. Foul play suspected. Offshore network tied to defunct Southwick Corporation under investigation. Anonymous whistleblower submits evidence linking major foundation to illegal global operations. Gabriel watched it unfold from a nameless motel room in New Hampshire. The duffel bag sat on the bed, half full with tapes, drives, and unmarked envelopes. The rest had already been distributed. Luther had connections, ex-cops, burned spies, old enemies with long memories and nothing left to lose. And once the fire hit the papers, the silence cracked. Within 2 weeks, a senator announced a formal inquiry. A retired banker in Zurich was arrested. A journalist leaked names from the Southwick roster, sparking a diplomatic scandal in 3 countries. And Amanda Pierce vanished. No charges, no photos, just gone like smoke in her own fire. Julian, however, wasn't so lucky. He was found in a penthouse in Buenos Aires under a different name. Local authorities said he jumped before they could arrest him, but Gabriel didn't believe it. Julian had never been the type to leap. He was the type to vanish, then wait for revenge. The body was never confirmed. No fingerprints, no dental. Just a story packaged clean. And Gabriel knew deep down his brother was still out there. Watching, waiting. The foundation didn't collapse overnight. But it began to rot. Investigations froze assets. Allies distanced themselves. Fear cracked the loyalty that wealth had once bought. And beneath it all, Malcolm Pierce's legacy crumbled, not with explosions but with quiet abandon. In the aftermath, Gabriel received 2 letters. One was a subpoena, expected. The other, a handwritten note in looping ink, smudged with age. You were never the weak one. You were just never mine to control. Theo. Attached was a deed. The farmhouse in Massachusetts. And a check for exactly $1. The only inheritance Gabriel ever accepted. Years passed. The farmhouse changed. The garden returned. Maria moved in eventually, unofficially at first, just weekends, then months, then permanence. She didn't ask about the past. She didn't need to. Gabriel turned the old shed into a writing studio. He spent his mornings with coffee and silence. Some days he felt the ghosts, his father's voice, Julian's shadow, Amanda's warning. But they no longer owned him. He still kept the journal locked away. Not out of fear. Out of memory. Out of proof that walking away was never weakness. Sometimes it was the first act of war. One winter morning, a letter arrived in a plain white envelope. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a single sentence. The foundation was only the beginning. See you soon. Gabriel smiled faintly, not surprised, not afraid. Then he placed the letter in the stove and watched it burn. He knew the past wasn't finished. But neither was he.